Good evening, good evening, good evening. You are locked into another episode of Transfer Tuesday at the Red Sea podcast. Today, we have got a very, very, very special guest joining us for our show. We're going to get our teeth tucked into a few outgoings at Liverpool Football Club. Could it potentially be the end for Nat Phillips? Could it potentially be the end for Divock Origi? Or, as an Oxlade-Chamberlain played himself back into contention to be involved in Liverpool's squad? Liverpool have taken on Atletico Bilbao and Osasuna in recent friendlies, and we've looked good. We've looked very bright. But without further ado, to digest and dissect the recent events, we've got, as I said, a very special guest and my co-host, Southern Scouser. Let's roll the intro.
Tell the world we are Liverpool, champions of England.
We've conquered all of Europe. We're never gonna stop. From Palestine to Turkey, we've won the fucking lot. But Paisley and the Shankly, the fields of Anfield Road. We are unsupported, and we come from Liverpool.
Gentlemen, firstly, before we get in, the new intro's rolling quite nice, isn't it? I quite like that.
I'm just ready to go. LA.
That's it, swinging the staff and so on and so forth. But yeah, we can see the comments going already. We've got a few guys in there, which is good to see. Steve in the comments as well. Thanks, Stephen. Good evening, lads. Looking forward. We've got Ali in the comments as well. Hello, mate. How are you? Umar in the comments also. Stephen in the comments as well. Wouldn't that be great? David, massive shout out to you as well. Our very own Chris in the comments also. Shame I couldn't get to meet up with you, mate, but I told you to holler if you saw me. But unfortunately, I think we missed each other at the game. Got a couple more in there as well. David, there you go, pal. Intros, fire lads. I really appreciate that. Stephen, hi lads, how you doing? But without further ado, we are joined by a very, very special guest, as I said. Please introduce yourself if they don't know who you are already. That would be great.
Evening, lads. Yeah, it's James Pearce here from The Athletic. Good to be with you.
Yeah, good to have you, mate. Really, really pleased to have you on as well. And I've got my co-host returning after a small hiatus. It's good to have you back, mate. As I said, the other half of me, the one that makes me complete. I don't want to hear my missus hear me say that too loud. But yeah, I felt lost about you, mate. But welcome back, SS.
Thank you, mate.
Good to see you on the screens again, my man. Good to see you on the screens.
It's good to be back, mate. Good to be back, feeling more like myself and getting back involved just at the right time, just before Liverpool kick off the brand new Premier League season.
Yeah, good. Got the comments going off as well. Samantha in the comments. Which one, Samantha? You need to clarify because I don't know which I'm going by today. I'm going by James or TF89 or Tiago's father. I don't know what name I'm using today. Which is also good. So, guys, it's been quite a busy week for Liverpool Football Club. It's been some really, really good things going on. Obviously, we had the pre-season games of Atletico Bilbao and Osasuna. But before we get into those games and dissect that information, let's give the viewers what they all want to hear and see is the transfer gossip. That's why they lock into Transfer Tuesday with the Red Sea podcast. KT jumping into the comments as well. Evening, guys. Welcome, JP. KT, it's good to see you in the comments as well, pal. One of our regular watchers and regular listeners. Thank you for locking in as well. So let's get into it. And there's been loads of rumours circulating with Liverpool Football Club in regards to a certain São Niguez and whether Liverpool are going to pull off that transfer. It's something that we potentially need because there's a bit of a Gini Wijnaldum-shaped hole in our midfield. I mean, James, before I come to you, SS, I mean, lead in with this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was very much impressed with Harvey Elliott in pre-season, especially in the Bilbao game that I was watching, and it made me feel a little bit less like we need a Gini replacement. Absolutely. I mean, of course, I still want one, but I feel seeing Naby Keita have bits and pieces in pre-season and the Ox as well, I'm not as afraid as I would have been if we don't sign a midfield replacement for Wijnaldum, even though I think we do still need one. But I think there's a Henderson and there's a Thiago and there's a Fabinho midfield free for the very big games. And the ones I've mentioned, you could throw a Curtis Jones and a Milner in there as well. There's lots of rotation, lots of cover for those three as well. So, yes, I would like to see one. Saul Niguez is the name that doesn't go away. I'm sure James Pearce will have a lot more info on that than I will. But yeah, I wouldn't say no to a cheeky 40, 50 mil Saul Niguez signing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And James, just before I come to you, we've got our very own Redmen TV in the comments. I think they're getting a bit salty. Listen, there's no replacement for you guys, and yeah, this is it's great to have James on with us. But James, I'll let you lead in with this one as well. Saul Niguez, I mean, it's like a bad smell that just won't go away. It's just lingering now, isn't it? And Liverpool just haven't been able to hammer this home. Or are you going to tell us otherwise? Is there actually any interest there in Saul Niguez?
No, I think it's just one of those rumours that just keeps on doing the rounds because he hasn't gone anywhere. That's the reality of it. You know, he's been offered round to a lot of clubs this summer. You know, the wage demands are very high. I just don't think it's the kind of deal that Liverpool are looking to do. I think you know, I think potentially there might be a space to bring in an attacker if Origi and Shaqiri were to move on, but no, unless there's a real change of heart on Liverpool's part, I'd be absolutely amazed if Saul became a Liverpool player in the next few weeks.
James, you know, again, I appreciate your comments on the Saul Niguez. I mean, my inbox on Twitter and so on and so forth has been filling up with people saying they claim to know this, they claim to know that, and occasionally I'll put a little something on the Twitter timeline and throw the supporters into hysteria. And I've always said I don't claim to be a transfer guru, but if something crosses my little desk, I'll always put it out just to, you know, test the waters. And it seems that there could maybe be a little bit of game of shadows with Liverpool at the moment. Are they waiting for his options to dwindle? We know that Barcelona were potentially interested, and now obviously with a certain Lionel Messi departing the club in the last couple of days, which has been a big thing. They're already tearing down the posters. It's almost like a demerger of it's almost like a divorce, isn't it? Where no, you take the posters, no, I'll take this, I'll take that. It seems a little bit off, but that just shows that Barca potentially don't have the ability to sign him. PSG now probably don't have the ability to sign him. Manchester United have a certain blocker in the way, which is Paul Pogba. Surely that gives Liverpool, and again, James, I'll come back to you on this one. Surely that gives Liverpool a clear run at a player that could potentially fill that hole. And if he doesn't have the option, surely he needs to lower his wage demands because, you know, a certain, you know, De Paul's gone into Atletico, meaning that maybe his minutes are going to be less.
Yeah, I mean, that is obviously a possibility that if the financial demands of it were to change, maybe that would lead to a reassessment. But certainly, you know, I can only speak for what I know at the moment. And whenever I've checked out those rumours, I've been told he is not a player that Liverpool are currently looking to pursue a deal for. And you know, I think the other thing that a lot of people probably overlook at the moment is the fact there isn't even space to bring in another overseas player because of the homegrown player rule. Liverpool are up to the absolute maximum. And yeah, I still think as well as Liverpool have done in pre-season, and lots of players on the fringes have stood up and delivered for Klopp, including a lot of really gifted young players. But yeah, I still think it would be a gamble not to replace Wijnaldum. But you know, at the moment, there is no sign of a replacement coming in. I think it's at the moment from what I'm hearing, it's very much, you know, looking for solutions within, and also I should say, you know, believing that they do have the solutions within, because, you know, I think it's right that, you know, essentially once we're into the season, I think we'll see Fabinho, Henderson, Thiago as the midfield three, and then, you know, Klopp does have options, doesn't he? That, you know, that leaves you Keita and Curtis Jones and Milner and Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think the only concern for me is, you know, it's placing probably a big emphasis on Keita and Oxlade both staying fit and healthy, which obviously we hope will be the case. But you know, of course, you know, they've both had their issues in the past.
I totally agree with you, and everything you said there, you know, is plausible solely because, like you said, we have been experimenting with that, what me and SS like to call the backup brigade. You know, a certain Naby Keita, a certain Oxlade-Chamberlain, and when we were in the need the most last season. Those players were found wanting. But Jurgen Klopp has come out after the last game and says that he insists that he's happy with his current squad. But that doesn't rule out making late signings in the window if they're available. If something is there for them to do, if there's business there for them to do, Jurgen Klopp seems like, he's open to that. And we talk about potentially a Shaqiri leaving. We talk about potentially, in the comments here, a Karius leaving, so on and so forth. And that will obviously change our position in terms of the homegrown ruling and what availability that we have. SS, just to give you the final say on this, I mean, like I said, Saul Niguez is a name, and I'll be open. I would love to see Saul Niguez in a Liverpool shirt. Yeah. I think he's a player of pedigree. I think he's a player of stature. He's a winner. He knows what it takes to win trophies. He's been successful in his time at Atletico Madrid. So that is someone I would like to add to our dressing room and our change room to maybe come in and fill that Gini Wijnaldum-shaped hole in the midfield. SS, talk to me, mate, because I know that you've got some strong views on this.
Yeah, I mean, the early doors when Gini did leave, we were linked with, Yves Bissouma, which for me wasn't really the caliber of player that we needed. It quickly moved on to, Renato Sanchez, and you thought, okay, this is getting a bit more like it. And then Yuri Tielemans was quite heavily linked as well. And me and you got quite excited at the prospect of him joining. And as you mentioned, Saul Niguez was then suddenly kind of just dropped in, and he's at that level, isn't he? That world level where he's been winning La Liga titles. He's been playing in Champions League finals for, a considerable amount of years. And he's got a lot of experience playing under Simeone in a very, very disciplined side. He's had to stick to his role. And the way that Atletico Madrid play, they don't tend to be flair too much. They just get the job done. They work hard. And that's kind of what made Liverpool as successful as they have. Our midfield three all had a very specific role. If you look at Henderson, really spreading the play, Wijnaldum of the high press being very, very difficult to dispossess, and Fabinho living up to his nickname, the Hoover. So Saul Niguez, I think, would suit Liverpool in terms of his style of play. But again, I would touch on what James mentioned there, where he's on the 350,000 a week wage structure, which that's the reason we don't bring Coutinho back. That's the reason we don't look at Messi and Haaland, Mbappe and Haaland, sorry, because they're just so astronomical in terms of wages, and would blow our structure out the window. And as soon as you do that, you look at Man United, you end up paying average players very, very high salary because you've raised that bar. So I think realistically, Liverpool, that's why we don't tend to see them sign players from top teams or established players as such, because the wage demand would be too much. So I think the likes of Yuri Tielemans is a more realistic aim. I can't imagine he's on much more than 150 at Leicester, and we could maybe bring him in a bit of a more realistic wage. But yeah, I think we're running out of time to bring in anybody. Obviously, for the start of the season is incredibly unlikely. But obviously, there's only a few weeks left of the window now, so they're going to have to get a move on pretty soon if they want to bring anybody in that position.
SS, I second that. Time is running out. We still have 3 weeks left of the window, and we know what it can be like on deadline day. But we haven't seen Liverpool's name flashing up on, deadline day on Sky Sports for a long, long time. We, historically, we get our business done quite quick. Maybe this is the window where that changes. And I just want to throw in some of the comments as well. Here we go. Plus Saul is guaranteed a pay rise every year. He stays at Atleti. Very, very good point. There's a few other comments in here as well, which are quite interesting. Renato Sanchez gets injured as much as Naby. Feels unnecessary risk. Very, very true. From Chris Brack there. Thank you, pal. Thank you for contributing as well. A couple more comments as well before we move on. Where are we going to? Allier. James Pearce said that about Thiago last season for Saul. Yeah.
No, I'd say that's
James. You want to answer that?
Yeah. I'll come in on that. I think, that's definitely not true. I think anyone who actually goes back and looks at what I wrote last summer would say that when people were saying in May and June that Thiago was a done deal to Liverpool, I was saying that it wasn't a done deal, and that Liverpool at that point was saying that they would probably only pursue a deal if Wijnaldum was to leave, because I think obviously Wijnaldum entering his last year, it was clear he wasn't gonna sign a new contract. So I think I said at the time that someone had said to me it was not impossible that Liverpool would sign Thiago, but at that point, not particularly likely. And obviously, he didn't actually sign until the middle of September. So so yeah, it's and that was by that point. Liverpool then knew that Wijnaldum wasn't gonna leave, and they decided, do you know what? This is just too good an opportunity to turn down. We're gonna press the button on Thiago as well. And also the other thing is, in the end, a massive reason why Liverpool were able to sign Thiago was because they'd left it. It got so late that the Bayern really wanted, because they knew he wasn't going to sign a new contract. They wanted him off their wage bill and to get a decent fee for him, and Bayern were prepared to accept. I think it was only like 4.5 or 5 million up front. And obviously at the time, due to COVID and the cash flow issues, that was also a big thing. So you can never say never in football, because lots of strange things happen. But I'd be really surprised if Saul or Renato Sanchez became a Liverpool player in the next few weeks.
So it really important there. And just hold that thought for a second, James, because I'm gonna press you a little bit on something, if you don't mind. But great comment here from Redmen TV. Just a game of chess at this point. Liverpool won't buy someone if it means Origi, Shaqiri, etc. surplus. Their value would drop. There is a danger that we'd have to pay without. There'd be a danger that we have to pay out without registering. So pay for them without registering them, and that's something Liverpool would obviously want to avoid. That's not our model. We're not going to have players on the books that are just sat there taking up squad place, collecting a wage and not contributing. But James, sorry, I just want to just rewind back to something. And again, like you said with the Thiago, sort of you clarifying your comments on the Thiago deal, that you said that Liverpool were in a place where they were kind of maybe trying to drive the market a little bit and always had an interest in Thiago, but weren't going to pull that trigger until it was absolutely right and that the deal was right. Playing devil's advocate here. And as I said, I've had a few things dropped into my Twitter box from various different sources. And again, I'm not trying to claim to be a transfer guru, but I can't ignore when someone says something quite similar. Are we potentially doing the same thing with Saul Niguez? Are we waiting for the optimum time, like I said earlier on, where the player almost doesn't have a choice and that Liverpool have got the market cornered? Is this 3D chess from Michael Edwards? We know how good he is in the transfer market. Is he looking at it thinking, blocker, Paul Pogba, PSG have just signed Messi, they ain't got any money. Barcelona are in the mud, they're broke, they haven't got any money. United aren't going to go out and spend. And we're probably more aware than we ever have been of teams' financial situation due to a little swear word called Super League. There would have been some conversations around the table where spreadsheets would have been shared saying, this is how much money we've got in the bank. This is how much money you've got in the bank. We're going to be aware of where teams sit. So could this be a similar tactic from Michael Edwards with Saul Niguez?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not privy to what goes on in Michael Edwards' head.
Come
so
on.
It's difficult to comment on that. But no, I mean, I can only tell you on the way I understand things at the moment, which is I think that is a very unlikely deal for Liverpool to get done when you take into account that the kind of financial commitment, because of the players' wages as much as the fee. So no, I think what if I was told the other day that as things stood, there were no guarantees that there would be any more incomings before the window shut, because it depended to a large extent on what outgoings there were, because primarily, as I think the comment previously highlighted, Liverpool will not find themselves in a position where they're having to pay someone 80, 90, 100,000 pound a week who can't even be registered for the Premier League this season because the squad is too bloated. So that is just not, some clubs will almost accept that as and take the hit, but Liverpool, there's no chance. So that's why it's not just about raising funds from sales. It's also about making space. For example, I think if Origi and Shaqiri were both to go, then I think that would almost inevitably lead to to the need to go and make an attacking signing where, I think at the moment, when you look at those midfield options, Klopp seems pretty happy to press on with what he's got. And I think the difference with the midfield options at the moment is you can't really see any of those midfielders leaving, can you, before the window shuts? It's a pretty settled group that I know. Probably rewind to the back end of last season and people were asking questions about Oxlade and Keita, and I think they've both entered the last 2 years of their deals, and you think that's a tricky position for Liverpool to be in, because you'd probably say up to now neither of them have really justified getting a new contract, but by the same token, once the contracts start to run down, obviously a player's value drops. But I think Liverpool know with both Oxlade and Keita that if they were to have really good seasons this season, then I think even next summer, they would be worth more than they are probably now in this COVID-affected market that we've seen. And who knows? Hopefully that they'll light up the Premier League this season and earn themselves new contracts anyway. But that's why I think, as things stand at the moment, I think if there was another signing to come in, it's probably going to be further up the pitch than centre midfield. But again, things can change fast. As players that the club have contacted previously may well change their demands significantly. There's definitely a bit of a game of brinkmanship. As you said before, Liverpool traditionally under Klopp have got their business done early, but I just think, for a club with a self-sustaining business model, COVID has affected that massively. We saw that last, September, with the fact that Thiago and Jota both got done after the season had already started. We saw it in January where, the whole of January we were crying out for centre-back reinforcements, and it was only at the very, very back end of the window that they went and brought in Ben Davis and Ozan Kabak. And I think it's going to be a similar story this time around because, certainly, I reported yesterday on The Athletic that Lyon have made contact over Shaqiri, but, there's a big gap at the moment between, I think they're prepared to pay 4 million and Liverpool wanting, I think 12 million. So, that's it's a fairly significant gulf. And then, obviously Nat Phillips is another one who was left out the squad last night, and been lots of clubs registering interest in him. But as things stand, as we talk now, there's no suitable bids on the table. And again, what do Liverpool do? Do they lessen their demands and take a smaller fee, or do they sit tight and wait till the very end of the window? I think that's why Michael Edwards earns the big bucks to make big decisions like that.
Of course. And you've led on quite nicely. And just before we delve into that, a couple of names I want to throw at you just to dust off this section in the show where we're talking about potential incomings. Danjuma from Bournemouth. Just really quick. He's something that kind of skirted across the desk as well. And I thought to myself, is it really? But when I actually went and watched some of his games, flair player, really attacking, can play anywhere across that front three. SS, how much do you know about Danjuma? Is that a player which you'd want to see at Liverpool?
Zero, so I'll throw it at James, mate. You have to come back to me with someone I've heard of.
back to you, James. Back to you.
I'd be absolutely lying if I told you I knew a huge amount about him. I think the other thing is he's certainly not someone I've heard discussed in the conversations that I've had with people. I think we reported on The Athletic recently that Jared Bowen was on Liverpool's short
on the list
of potential attacking signings. So yeah, and I think realistically that is, I don't know. I got a lot of negative comments when I tweeted out the link to the story initially. And okay, he might not be the most sexier names or whatever, but I think the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, do you know what? Actually, when you look at him, I think he does tick a lot of the Klopp boxes in terms of a player that, because the reality is, I think Liverpool buying the finished article with Alisson and with Van Dijk, that was almost an anomaly really because of the Coutinho money. I still think in the next few years, as the squad does evolve and get refreshed, because it will have to be refreshed. People at the club are already talking about probably 2022 being the year when that really gets underway, because they're going to have to bring in younger players, and so I think Liverpool will be in the market for almost, rather than the finished article, they'll be in the market for what Sadio Mane was like, 4 or 5 years ago when he came in, and similarly with Mo Salah, those players who aren't absolutely world class, but they believe that, with Klopp and with the structure at Liverpool, that they can elevate them to that kind of level.
Yeah, and there's a couple of questions which are rolling in, guys. Please save your questions till the end. We'll do a little quick fire question with James at the end of the show. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. You touched on the Gerard Bowen one as well. SS also looked like he died inside when you mentioned Gerard Bowen as well, because it's just not sexy, is it? But I can see the profile of the player. SS, I'm sure that you can agree with the profiling of that player. Not necessarily with his attribute, but the profiling.
No chance. Anyone talking up Jarrod Bowen for Liverpool, come on. We've got to give our head a wobble. We're Liverpool Football Club, not, West Ham. It's not good enough. Jarrod Bowen is not going to be pulling up any trees in the Champions League. We're looking at getting rid of players like Shaqiri. They're better than Jarrod Bowen. So are we trying to move forward, or are we trying to move backwards? And yes, he's English, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to buy an English player, does it? We've got players like Chamberlain. We've got players like Harvey Elliott, who, again, I'd say are better, having already got them at the club, than spending 30, north of 30 million on a very average Jarrod Bowen, who's never knocked on the door of the England team, of the England squad. Harvey Barnes is a player that's been linked a little bit more recently, who I think is a better version of Jarrod Bowen. If we have to look at that kind of profile, if we need to go English, if we need another attacker in and around that budget, then for me, he is a step above Jarrod Bowen. But no, I mean, honestly, anybody that's saying Jarrod Bowen for Liverpool, realistically, I think are just kind of getting on the bandwagon of trusting Klopp, trusting the process, where realistically, yes, everybody says about Andy Robertson coming in from Hull, 8 million, it was a risk-free transfer, which is, James, something you like to say, but when you're looking at spending 30, 40 million pounds on someone, it smells of Stuart Downing to me.
Look, I think the profile is right. It's not a sexy transfer. We know that. It's not something that I'm sat here thinking and I'm warmed and touched inside that Jarrod Bowen could potentially pull in on the red of Liverpool. It's not. But when I look at the attributes of the player and the kind of progress that he's made this season under David Moyes, could Klopp get a tune out of him? Is he gonna run and do everything that we ask him to do? Is he gonna press that back line? I think he will. Has he got a final delivery in terms of his crossing ability? He's got a bit of that. But you're right. Harvey Barnes is a better option. He's a better player. He's a more rounded player. But I feel that Jarrod Bowen would probably start with a 3. And Harvey Barnes would probably start with a 5, and that I think would force a hand somewhere in the economics of how Liverpool Football Club works, to say, well, you've got A and B. B is doing slightly better, but I reckon we can get A to where B is in that period of time. So that might force some hands there. Thanks, guys, in the comments. Really, really appreciate you guys contributing. As I said, we'll do a quick little round robin with James before we close the show with a couple of your questions. He's under no duress to answer them, but I'm sure he will do. But yeah, let's just jog it on slightly because there's a few bits to get through as well. We've covered obviously Jarrod Bowen as well, but let's just flick onto the outgoings. And James, you touched on the Shaqiri one. There have been some links to Lyon, as you said, and like you said, we're worlds apart on the fees. But another one that got passed across my nose, and you might turn around and say to me that this is rubbish. But Inter Milan, Shaqiri's a player that's been at Inter Milan previously, and it was said that they would potentially look to bring him back for the right fee because they're in a position where they're selling high and they're going to look to replace with nominal transfers, more creative in the transfer market because Inter Milan are in a bit of trouble financially. Is that something which has come to your attention at all? Is there any truth in those rumours at all?
No, certainly not aware of anything with Inter. I was told Lazio and Napoli were the two that had made contact with Shaqiri's representatives. Previously there'd been some interest from Spain. I think it was Sevilla, were one of the clubs from there. I mean, obviously Shaqiri gave an interview, didn't he, and in Italy recently, saying how much he wanted to play in Italy and was talking up the chances of going to Lazio. But again, it's at the moment there just isn't anything resembling a suitable deal on the table. I think, obviously when you see Shaqiri's absence from the squad last night, I think like most people, I thought, oh, well, something must be cooking if he's not even on the bench. But I was told that no, nothing imminent at all, and that as things stand, they're still waiting for someone to even get close to what they want. The other thing I was told was that I think Liverpool have found that some of the clubs contacting them were under the illusion that Shaqiri was down to his last year, which has probably resulted in some very low offers, because I think he is officially into his last year, but Liverpool have the option to extend by 12 months, which obviously they would do for the purposes of selling him. So essentially, I think there was a similar thing with Lovren when because I think Zenit initially thought they'd be able to get Lovren a lot cheaper than they actually were able to, for the same reason that Liverpool had this 12-month option that they could trigger. So I think Liverpool have been keen to get the message out there that no, he's got 2 years left. He's just lit up the Euros in parts for Switzerland, and if you want him, you're going to have to pay market value.
And that's also a frustration. SS, you and I have spoken about this, being incredibly vocal on the Red Sea podcast about Shaqiri. Why can we not just get the Xherdan Shaqiri, which plays for Switzerland? I want that Xherdan Shaqiri. That's the one that I want. I don't want these cameo performances that we've seen. We look at the Manchester United game, absolutely outstanding. The West Ham game, the assist from Mo Salah, absolutely sensational. If we could get that player turn up for Liverpool Football Club week in, week out, surely we've got a player which is a phenomenal player on the world stage, surely.
Yeah, I agree. And like you say, we've said in the past that when Liverpool change up their team, when they change personnel, when they change shape, we see the very best of Shaqiri, whether we're chasing a game and we need a goal and we put him on in that number 10 position, whether we're against Barcelona and we need to win 4-0 and we need to change the style of play slightly, getting more crosses in, which is what Shaqiri did in that game. And the other one that springs to mind is the Everton, the 5-2 crazy game when, again, the likes of Origi come in, Shaqiri come in, and the shape of the team is slightly different, and it almost suits Shaqiri that little bit more, playing in that pocket like he does for Switzerland, as you say. But I completely agree with Steve in the comments. And the issue is that Switzerland at the Euros play Shaqiri in a 10 behind two strikers. One of those strikers is Seferovic, who's very tall, very old school number 9. Get it on his head and he will score. And Liverpool don't play with two strikers. We don't really play with a great big target man, and we don't play with a 10. So unfortunately, in the week to week basis of 4-3-3 with a 6, Shaqiri is a square peg in a round hole. And that's why we only really get 3 or 4 performances a season when that square hole, that square peg goes into a square hole, and it actually works for that one game, that couple of matches and those couple of moments that realistically, if Shaqiri was to move on this summer, there's only probably a handful of games that you would remember him contributing in. So I don't think we're ever going to get anything out of him in the way that we play. It's time to move him on. If we can get 15, great. If we can get 10, I'd take it. And anything lower than that, I think, if we're approaching the very last week of the window and we've got someone that we want to come into that non-homegrown slot, and we've got a bid on the table of 5 to 7 million for Shaqiri, I'd rather take the hit of a lower fee for Shaqiri to get that player in that we need, and to just not get that player, keep Shaqiri on 80 to 100k a week for a whole season, and realistically get again a hand for the game. So unfortunately, Liverpool have put themselves in this position. We've kept a lot of average players for far too long. We're trying to move them all on at once, and as we've said with FIFA and Football Manager, unfortunately, it's not always the case that you can ship out 5, 6, 7 players in one window, as Man United have also shown. They've kept hold of the likes of Matic and Mata and Phil Jones, people that just don't contribute and stay on the wages. Marcus Rojo. So we need to be very careful because they've got players like Phil Jones on their books that wasn't even registered to play in the Premier League, earning 100k a week, which is absolutely disastrous. So I agree with James. I think we're a little bit more, we're not going to fall into that trap, but it's that 50-50 of, without moving these players out, especially the likes of Origi and Shaqiri, because they come under the non-homegrown, until we manage to move them on or accept a lower fee than perhaps we want, I think we're going to struggle to see any movement in the incomings, really.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's some great comments in here from Steve. Dave's LFC chats. All right, mate, how you doing? Caught your show the other day as well. Sensational viewing. Kev, again, another one that echoes what you said, SS, and I totally agree with you. Square pegs in round holes. He just doesn't fit the system. Kev, again, lads, Origi. And that's a player which we want to just touch on quickly. He, as far as I'm concerned, is holding on by his fingernails. James, you might have some views on this. There was rumours that he was due to depart at the tail end of the Premier League winning season. There was offers there for Origi, and for whatever reason, the club we just couldn't close a deal. Whatever it may be, it just didn't manifest and come to fruition for him to leave the club. But he's rarely contributed. Last season, didn't even get one goal. It just feels like his time at the club is drawing to a close. And you might be able to enlighten some of the viewers and the listeners. Is there interest in Origi? Are there bids on the table for him?
No, not that I'm aware of, and I think that is obviously one of the reasons why he is still at Liverpool. Obviously, he got the new improved contract, didn't he, on the back of the Champions League final in 2019, and it's such a shame because I think Divock Origi is. Well, he's an iconic figure of the club with some of the contributions he's made. He's the kind of guy that could walk back into Anfield in 30, 40, 50 years time and he'd be widely embraced, and he'd never have to buy himself a drink in the Sandon. And he's a lovely fellow, and he's incredibly laid back and relaxed, and and I think that probably helps him in moments like the goal from the quickly taken corner against Barcelona. So nothing really seems to faze him, and in some circumstances that's a blessing, and then I think in other circumstances it's probably a bit of a curse in terms of I think he could probably almost do with a bit more fire in his belly at times. And I think you would have got some players in his position who have played so little football the last 12 months who would be turning around saying to the club, what's happening? If I'm not going to play, I want to leave now.
Let me go. Yeah.
Again, to my knowledge, that has not happened. He seems more than content to stay and fight for his place, and that's his prerogative. Contracts have to work both ways. You can't moan and groan when players, when obviously when you give a player a long contract, that's up to him. If he wants to sit tight, most players do just want to play. But clearly at the moment, there's nothing on the table that's suitable. And I think, obviously there's been interest from Wolves previously. I think it was 2018 when they actually agreed a £22 million fee with Liverpool.
Yeah,
but take that right now, won't we?
Yeah, he didn't want to. He didn't want to go. Even back in January, before I know Liverpool were open to the idea of selling him back in January, but again, no suitable offers, and that led Klopp to deciding, well, okay, we'll keep Origi and we'll loan out Minamino instead. But it's a shame because it did feel towards the back end of last season that Origi and Liverpool was just reaching a conclusion, and that a parting of the ways just probably looked like the best thing for everyone. And I still think that might happen before the window shuts. But again, we're back to what we talked about, towards the start about how desperate are Liverpool to offload him, and are they prepared to take probably a lesser fee than they really hope for? Because I think it's quite difficult to actually put a price on Origi. I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, even back in January, I was getting told, 15 to 20. And I think, I just don't see someone paying, that kind of money for someone who's played so little football. It was a sign of how far he'd kind of fallen, really. The fact that, he didn't even make the standby list, did he, for Belgium for the Euros?
Yeah.
Which is sad when you think that, this is a kid who was playing in World Cup quarterfinals when he was still a teenager. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Origi in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I agree. There's some great comments coming in on the topic as well. Steve, one of our major contributors, thank you for getting involved, Steve. Football doesn't have many players that settle for 10 minutes here and there, says it all for me. And James, I think you hit the nail on the head. He seems very comfortable. It's the desire to sell versus the kind of the will to stay. And he seems like he's just incredibly comfortable. And it echoes what I heard at the back end of that season was, there was a bit of interest, but it wasn't from the clubs that he thought that he would like to play for. And he was more than content being an understudy. And there is room for players in the squad like that. There is room for players like that just want to plod. But when they come in, they need to contribute. And he hasn't contributed. So that's why his position at Liverpool Football Club is potentially under question and under fire. SS, I'll lead with you. What's your thoughts?
No, I agree. I mean, Divock Origi, he was loaned out originally, wasn't he? A couple of times. And then really, because we didn't buy anybody else, Daniel Sturridge was struggling with injuries. He became part of the backup, fighting with Sturridge to see who could become number 2 behind Firmino. And he kind of won that battle purely because of his availability over Daniel Sturridge. And he did pop up with the odd goal here and there. But like James says, since 2019, since that Champions League run, it's just been a bit of a fall off a cliff from Origi, and performances have dipped. And just general hunger, like you say, on the pitch. He comes in, even in the pre-season game. You mentioned your sons, but we're even saying, what's this guy playing at? Against Osasuna. Yeah. Didn't look interesting. A week before the season, you think Firmino's probably not ready to play 90 minutes yet. He should be absolutely chomping at the bit. He's not gone to the Euros, as far as I was aware. So he's been since day one at Liverpool pre-season. He could have been working his socks off. He could have been starting up front in the pre-season games over in Austria. He could have been sitting on 3 or 4 goals by now. We've not played against, Innsbruck and Stuttgart and Mainz. These are teams that the backup striker for Liverpool should be making mincemeat of it, especially in pre-season. And he's barely showed up. So I agree. It's a bad taste. It's such a shame if he wants to just stick around and be second, third choice, because we've even mentioned Minamino and Chamberlain as potential false nines, and I honestly think they're ahead of him at the minute. Klopp didn't really fancy him last year. I think he made 9 appearances off the bench. And again, I think if he stays this year, it's just a hindrance of us bringing another foreign player in. I genuinely can't see him playing more than 5 matches in the big 2 competitions. I can only really see him playing alongside the youngsters and the under 23s in the cups, which is a real shame, because he's only 26, 27. He came into the club relatively young. So for me, I think he should be showing a little bit more ambition. I agree with James. Contracts do work both ways, but when you're falling down to third, fourth choice in your own position behind players that's not even their role, it's got to be time to move on for your own football career, surely.
Yeah, and like you said, there's a lad at the end of it that needs to play football, and you never want to hold anybody back, but there has to be that desire, that fire desire from Divock Origi. I don't think it's a question of talent or ability, because we've seen glimpses of it. The goal against Barcelona, the goal against Everton, the goal against Spurs in the Champions League final. There's been countless other important goals that he has scored for Liverpool Football Club. So we cannot forget that, and we underpin that with everything that we're saying. I just think it is just that fire desire. Does he want it more than a Gordon, more than an Oxlade-Chamberlain who's had limited minutes, more than a Taki Minamino who has had limited minutes? Does he want it more? And I just don't feel that he does. Quickly, we're going to move on to Nat Phillips. And James, I'm going to come to you on this as well. Just really, really quick. He hasn't played. Like you said, the alarm bells normally go off when a player doesn't feature in pre-season. He didn't even make the bench. is there someone somewhere willing to stump up the money for Nat Phillips to take him away from Liverpool? He's had a breakout season. Prior to this season, he was linked with moves away from the club, going back on loan to Stuttgart, potentially departing the club. His transfer fee is surely going to be the highest this season, the money that we command, than it ever will be, because he's just going to go back to being a fifth choice centre back. He's never going to get in ahead of Konate, Van Dijk, Gomez, or even a Matip. Do we take the money that's on the table now and run? And are there any suitable offers for Nat Phillips?
Yeah, I'd still expect Nat Phillips to go before the window shuts. I think it's just a question of whether Liverpool do have to compromise in terms of their demands, because I've written a few times that they Liverpool looking around at what they think are comparable deals for centre backs, and they think 12 to 15 million is fair, considering the impact that Nat Phillips had in the second half of last season. And there's been a lot of inquiries about him. Burnley, Brighton, West Ham, Newcastle, to name a few. But again, I think a lot of clubs seem to be sitting tight and waiting and hoping that the asking price does drop a bit. So yeah, I think it will happen, just because I think Nat Phillips himself knows that not only is this probably the perfect time this summer for Liverpool to sell, but it's also, I think, the perfect time for Nat Phillips to go and get himself another really good club, because he was absolutely sensational. And I'd be lying if I said that I thought he had it in him to perform to the level he did, and was so integral to Liverpool qualifying for the Champions League. So yeah, I think he knows that as well, because he wants to play. Like we talk about what motivates players. Are they happy being a bit part player? But no, he had a taste of the big time last season, and he really wants that again. And I think as long as there's an offer that comes in the next couple of weeks that is acceptable to Liverpool, then I think he'll go, and he'll leave with everyone's absolute best wishes, because it's certainly not a case of him being one that Liverpool are trying to shove out the door. I think there's just a realization on the part of all parties that it probably does make sense for it to happen. And then it'll be interesting to see what then happens with Ben Davies, because there's been a fair bit of interest in him. So and I know Sheffield United had an initial loan offer rejected, because they wanted an option written in there to buy him, I think, next summer. Well, I think at the moment Liverpool, if they go down the route of loaning him, I think they would prefer not to have a set fee in terms of an option to buy, but probably on the basis that who knows what's going to happen with the market in the next 12 months, and and how well he does. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I'd expect Nat Phillips to go.
So that sounds like something that we don't know.
No. I just think sometimes when you take a step back and you look at it, and I think when all parties probably are on the same page, I just think it makes a move more likely.
It's inevitable, isn't it? It's inevitable.
Yeah, but in saying that, there still has to be an offer that is acceptable. But I just think there's also not that there is a dearth of really good centre backs, and I think he would do a brilliant job for probably probably outside the top 6 or 7 for anyone else in the Premier League.
I totally agree with you, and there are some clubs out there which I have some affection for. I'm a huge Liverpool fan, but I think you've got clubs that are staple clubs in the Premier League, like your Newcastles, your Aston Villas, your Leeds, those kind of clubs which have got huge fan bases. And Nat Phillips could go somewhere like that and be an absolute god. I mean, I read today that Newcastle are potentially interested in Rob Holding of Arsenal. Like, Nat Phillips is better. I think Nat Phillips could go there and do a job and be absolutely fantastic. I really, really do. Now, just before we close, because obviously I know that time's jogging on a little bit. We've had James on for a while, and guys, I just want to get to some quick questions, because I know that there was a few questions in there. SS, can you just throw up a couple of the questions that were there for James? Some quick fire. round robin questions if we can.
Yeah, no problem at all. So there was a good one from Steve here. James, do you think the window closes with the squad as it is right now? How much movement do you realistically see?
I mean, it's so difficult at the moment with so many things up in the air. But no, there will be changes to the squad. I think before it shuts. I think I still think I think for there to be an incoming, I think probably a Shaqiri and Origi will probably need to move on. But then even that is there's so many things that can change in terms of whether there's a deal there that Liverpool think it can improve what they've got already on financial terms that make sense. So yeah, I still think it'll be there's a fair bit to be decided in the next couple of weeks, and obviously the outs will have an influence on whether there's ins.
And just adding one to this one, Chris is saying that obviously Lautaro Martinez is being linked with £60 million moves to Arsenal, to Spurs. Are Liverpool realistically going to let this happen? £60 million for a striker of that ability, when we know realistically this time next summer we're probably going to be in the striker market, not just for an option, but actual starting number 9. Would you see someone like Vlahovic or Martinez potentially coming to Liverpool in 12 months' time or towards the end of this window?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a deal for Liverpool in this window, because I think you look at it, and I think probably for the player, would he really want to come when he knows he's trying to get ahead of, you've got the front four as we kind of accept it now, with Jota having made that leap last summer. I don't see that as being a realistic one for this window. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, with contract renewals, we know that Liverpool obviously are looking to get Mo Salah tied down. Sadio Mane, I'd expect after that. So whether maybe in 12 months' time they're in the market for an elite number 9, that may well be the case then. But yeah, not for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I think there's a good one to end on as well. Sorry, James, did you want to add anything?
No, just on the contract renewal, because we can end on Chris's question, but just on the contract renewal, Jordan Henderson. Please tell me, James, that you this is happening, because I feel it needs to happen. That was my question. I was holding it in, burning inside. The standing ovation he got at the Osasuna game just showed what Jordan Henderson means to Liverpool Football Club. I mean, he gets it. He just gets it, doesn't he? He understands what it is to be and what responsibility it is, A, to play for Liverpool, and B, to be the captain of this club. Surely it's got to happen. Is it just a case of when?
No, I wouldn't say it's definitely a case of when. I think it'll just be interesting to see how that situation develops, because as we reported on The Athletic, there was no progress whatsoever really in terms of the discussions that took place at the back end of last season and then prior to the Euros, which clearly what was on the table wasn't massively attractive to Henderson. And I think certainly from people I've spoken to, it's certainly not about money. It's about wanting to feel valued and important in terms of where Liverpool see him in 2 years' time, because of course he's under contract as it is till he's 33. But I'm sure Jordan Henderson would say, well, hang on a minute, I firmly believe I will be an elite midfielder at the age of 34, 35. And I think he wants a contract on the table that shows that Liverpool as a club believe that to be the case as well. So it's a tricky one, because I do think I can kind of see it from the other way in terms of I think it's quite right that Trent Alexander-Arnold, you get that sorted. Fabinho, Alisson, I think Mo Salah has to be the next one. Virgil van Dijk. They are the absolute priorities. So I can understand why at the moment, Henderson, because he is still 2 years left. It's not, not like he's just entered his last year. And I do get this, not wanting to commit huge sums of money to players who, are towards the back end of their career. We saw that with the fact that they were prepared to let Wijnaldum leave for nothing. But I also think that Jordan Henderson's a special case in terms of everything he gives you. He's been so integral to all the glory that we've enjoyed under Klopp.
Yeah.
And I know he would love to be at Liverpool for the rest of his playing career, and I'd certainly love that to be the case as well. So I just hope that some kind of agreement can be reached.
Yeah, I agree, and I think maybe Jordan's slightly mindful of what he saw of a certain Steven Gerrard. Maybe he's trying to protect himself a little bit and not fall maybe victim to a similar kind of treatment. Looking in from the outside, you may know a little bit more than I do, but looking from the outside, maybe he doesn't want to fall victim to a similar kind of treatment, and he's trying to protect and solidify his role in the club. And said, I read your report and your column and stuff on that, because I do subscribe to Athletic. So yeah, it was a really, really interesting take. So guys, just as we wrap it up, SS, where can the viewers find us this week? What have we got going on? Tell them what we've got wrapping up.
Yeah, so we've got Premier League preview on Thursday with lead judges from AFTV. So we're going to be talking about Premier League predictions, where we think everyone's going to be coming, talking about all the big teams. And obviously Arsenal are the first match of the season on the Friday night. So I thought we'd start off with that. And then on Friday, myself, James, Courtney and Stephen, the Fab Four, will be previewing the Norwich game as well. We'll obviously be doing a Red Sea full-time over on LFC Day Trippers after the Norwich match as well. So lots and lots to look forward to. And yeah, the season now underway. I'm looking forward to talking about proper matches, proper league tables, and not farts in the wind with football Twitter transfers. And let's get on with the real stuff. And if we get a couple of players over the line before the end of that window, happy days.
I totally agree. And guys, make sure you like and subscribing to the Red Sea podcast on Twitter, YouTube, and on Instagram. We also have a TikTok as well. So make sure you're following us on all of our socials. Guys, also, we have our Aussie representatives over at the Red Sea podcast Down Under. They'll be doing some fantastic analysis of games, which we call the training ground. So likely they'll be breaking down all of the game from the Norwich game the day after in regards to how we performed. Obviously, they're on Aussie time, so you'll be able to catch them on the channel list over at the Red Sea podcast. But James, thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Before you go, just tell some of the listeners and the viewers of obviously where they can find you if they don't know already. I'm sure most of them do. Yeah,
on Twitter at James Pearce LFC, and obviously at theathletic.co.uk. So obviously the loads of Liverpool content planned for the new season. So hopefully see everyone over there.
Yeah, definitely. And guys, if you're not already, a bit of a plug here. Subscribe to The Athletic. There's some good content on there. There really, really is. Some really, really nice, 2-minute reads, some quick digestive stuff as well. If you're on the move, you haven't got to read a whole article. There is some really, really good snippets there. Some really incisive stuff that's coming out of The Athletic, whether you're a Liverpool fan or if you choose to commit a sin and support anybody else. But it is what it is. But James, thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Sorry, SS, go on.
No, I just said thank you, James. Much appreciated for joining us.
No worries, lads. Yeah, good to chat to you and hopefully speak to you again.
Definitely.
Yeah, we'd love to get you back. And guys, thank you for you guys in the comments as well. We appreciate your support. Make sure you like and subscribing. Follow us at the Day Trippers and obviously at the Red Sea podcast. But it's bye from me, Thiago's father, my co-host SS, and James Pearce today. Thank you.